Hello, everybody. This is Nick Totero, Professor of Information Technology and Computer Science, Lakeland Community College. Let's talk about network sniffing. You may also hear it called eavesdropping. It's a form of passive network monitoring. Now, before we get started in actually sniffing and doing demonstrations, I want to jump back into a Wayback Machine and talk about the early days of networking. In the early days of networking, we used a technology called hubs. And hubs were basically a shared transmission protocol or shared transmission medium. Imagine you're holding a copper wire and you have 4 or 5 people all holding the same copper wire. If I was to send an electrical pulse down that copper wire, you would all feel that electrical pulse. And that's what a hub did. It basically had the traffic go across the entire network, but the two entities that were sharing information, they were the only ones that were paying attention. The other entities would still hear it, but the two that were communicating were the ones that were paying attention. The other ones would just ignore the traffic. Well, as networks got more and more popular, more and more pervasive, what happened was that generates a lot of unnecessary traffic that computers need to pay attention to. Imagine a freeway. Every time I put an on and off ramp on a freeway, it increases the network traffic. Along comes the next technology up, the next layer up is what is called switching. In a switch network, the two sender receivers, they establish a connection, and the switch, the hardware, establishes kind of a immediate connection between the two. So the other devices don't even hear that traffic. I want to go up to my screen and I want to show you a diagram of my test network. So here's a little diagram of my test network, and this is going to be a switch network, or actually this is just the network period. Not talking about switching or hubs yet. And I have my firewall, and then I have my computers. For this demonstration, we're only going to look at 3 computers. We're going to look at Godzilla. That's going to be my Kali machine. That's going to be the attacker. And we're going to have Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob are just 2 computers that wish to communicate with each other. Now, if I go to a switched network, which is the network technology that most networks follow now, there may be situations of older networks having hubs, but they're kind of fallen to the wayside. Hubs have been replaced 15, 20 years ago, so you might come across some old networks that dealt with hubs. But if you look at my screen, if Alice and Bob want to communicate with each other, the switch will establish a connection between the two. The other computers don't even hear the traffic. In a second, I'll show you a hub network, but just imagine that the other computers can't even hear the traffic. However, let's say you have a computer, and we'll say this Ubuntu computer, Ultraman. Ultraman may be a network administrator, and that network administrator could potentially talk with the switch and ask the switch to provide all the network traffic. That would require specialized software. That would be done at the administrative level. That wouldn't be the average person, because Ultraman would be talking directly with the switch. Ultraman still could not hear the conversation, but because Ultraman would be talking directly to the switch, it would see the traffic through the switch. Versus a hub. In a hub situation, very similar to that copper wire that you and your friends would be holding and send electrical pulses, everybody would hear the conversation. Everybody would hear the communication. Everybody would be aware of the electrical impulses. And what would happen is each device, the devices that weren't talking to each other, would basically ignore all the traffic, right? The only ones that would be really paying attention would be Alice and Bob. This would be akin to you're at a party and two people are talking at a party, and yet there's all the noise in the background. So now let's talk about switching. For switching to occur, three things have to happen for switching to occur. One, for sniffing to occur, three things have to happen. One, you have to be on a hub network, right? If you are the average individual or just a hacker and you don't have the administrative software to go to the switch, it would require that you use the hub, right? So sniffing, first of all, requires a hub. The second thing that a sniffing requires is that you would all be on the same physical hub, meaning you're all plugged in. This is not wireless, this is wired technology or bound technology. So even a hub would not transmit beyond its capability. So if this was a hub, the traffic here would not be going here. There'd be some finagling and stuff like that, but just keep in mind, everybody would have to be on the same physical network. So 2 out of 3, 1, it has to be hub technology, and 2, it has to be on the same physical hub. Finally, the listening device, the eavesdropping device, the sniffing device has to be placed in what's called promiscuous mode. Promiscuous mode basically allows that individual device to pay attention to all the traffic. So 3 things. Has to be a hub technology, has to be on the same physical hub, and then the device has to be in promiscuous mode. Now, I've created a test network. In my test network, I'm going to have really 4 computers. We're only going to be concerned with 3. The 4th one is obviously the router. We're going to have Godzilla. That is the listener. That's the one who's going to be listening to traffic. And we're going to have Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob are going to be sending information back and forth to each other. So let's go up to my test network. Going to move this over here. And I have 3 computers on this screen. Let them come up. Over here on the left-hand side, that's Godzilla. That's going to be the listening device. Godzilla has a network address of 10.0.0.13, or we'll just say 13 for shorthand. Alice, who is represented by Alice in Wonderland here, let me log into Alice. And Alice has a network address. We can look that up real quickly, but Alice has a network address of 10.0.0.14. Godzilla is 13, Alice is 14. Bob, let's log into Bob here. And Bob is represented by Bob Marley. So we have Godzilla, Alice, and Bob. And let's see what Bob has to say. And Bob is on computer 10.0.0.12. So Callie is 13, Alice is 14, Bob is 12. Let's go to Godzilla and just double check. And we can see that Godzilla is 13. Let's run Wireshark. Wireshark is just a network monitoring tool that allows us to monitor the network. Now, I will tell you, when I first started teaching networking, one of the labs we used to do all the time was network monitoring. But again, that was 20, 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, which most networks were in a hub environment. Most network cards can be thrown into promiscuous mode fairly quickly. So here is the Wireshark. They're all on the same network. We saw that in the diagram, and it's listening. But it's not gathering any traffic because I'm on a separate network. It doesn't have traffic going on it. Let me go over here to Alice and let me ping Godzilla. So Alice, who is at 10.0.0.14, is going to ping Godzilla, who is 10.0.0.13. And we can see very quickly Godzilla heard the traffic. Now, Godzilla heard the traffic because it was traffic directed immediately towards Godzilla. So now, let me clear Alice again. And this time, I'm going to have Alice ping Bob. And Bob is at 10.0.0.12. You can see that it's pinging and Bob is responding. I'll break it here, but nothing is happening over here at Wireshark. That is because I did not turn this into promiscuous mode. Even though this is on a hub network, all three computers are physically on the same hub network, I didn't turn promiscuous mode on Godzilla. So all the traffic that's going between Alice and Bob, Godzilla's ignoring, right? So now let me restart Godzilla in promiscuous mode. I'll quit without saving, and I will say shut down. Now this is a VirtualBox virtual environment, so all I need to do is go into the virtual network card and tell it go into promiscuous mode. We're going to assume that they're all on a same physical hub environment. Swing this over here. I'll say Godzilla. I'm going to go to network. They're all on the same internal network. And under advanced, under promiscuous mode, I'm going to say listen to all the other VMs, right? Because it's on a separate network, I can listen to all, but I'm just going to listen to all the VMs. Let me close this up, and well, let's start it first. Give it a minute to start. Swing this back over here. All right, I paused the video so you didn't have to spend 2, 3, 4 minutes watching it just come up. So let me log back into Godzilla. And while this is coming up, let's take a look at my network again. So the first part of the video, I had a switched network, which meant when Alice was talking to Bob, only those two were listening. Now I'm going to have a hub network where all the devices, excuse me, where all the devices are in the same physical hub, they're on the same physical network, and I told Godzilla to go into promiscuous mode or listen to all the traffic. All right? So a little recap there. Alrighty, and if I do an IF config just to see what's out there, so let's recap here. So we're all, Alice is 10.0.14, Bob is 10.0.0.12, and Godzilla is 10.0.0.13. Now let's turn Wireshark on Godzilla. All right. So it's sitting there on the network. It's waiting for traffic. I'm going to do exactly what I did before. I'm going to go to Alice and I'm going to ping Godzilla. So Alice is going to ping 10.0.0.13. Where are we? 13. You can see almost instantly that the communication between Alice and Godzilla occurs, right? I can do the same thing with Bob. Let's do that. Let's actually do that. Let me clear Alice. Let's go to Bob. Now, Bob is going to ping Godzilla. And again, almost immediately Wireshark hears that communication. Why? Because both Alice and Bob were talking directly to Godzilla. That's what we expected. But now from Alice, I'm going to ping Bob. This is a hub network. They're on the same physical network, and Godzilla is in promiscuous mode. So at Alice, I'm pinging Bob. And Bob is 10.0.0.12. You'll notice over here, here's our traffic, right? So where is it? 14 is talking to 12, 12 is responding to 14, 14 is reestablishing 12, and it's going back and forth with the ICMP. So Godzilla is now sniffing or eavesdropping the network. Now, let's go to Alice for a second here. We're still capturing data. This is a quiet network. I don't have a lot of things going on this network. So you know what? Let's go to Alice, represented by Alice in Wonderland. And let's open up web browsing. This next step is from Alice, we're going to surf the internet. Because this is a routed network, I can reach out to the internet. I should see, or I will see, that traffic over at Godzilla as soon as the web browser comes up. Try it again. My machine is slow. I'm running 4 different machines at the same time, so it just takes a little bit of time. Give it a second. There was a whole bunch of big jump in traffic. You can see that it looks like the default page is Google. We're doing some DNS. This is live traffic. And I'm going to say www.lakelandcc.edu and spell it right. You can see all the traffic heading over here. Give it a second. Again, slower. So it's just going through that process, right? We're listening and we're sniffing the network. So let me wrap some things up here. Sniffing and eavesdropping, it's kind of falling to the wayside because we're just getting away from, or we've gotten away from hub technology. That doesn't mean that there might not be a network out there that is using older technology, and that's where this would come into play. If you or the bad actor had access to that older network, chances are not going to happen too often. Now, could a bad actor have access to a administrative account that has access to the switch software? Yeah, that's when you would probably get into more of a sniffing. But if I'm a bad actor and I have access to the administrator account, sniffing the network is probably not on a high level of what I'm going to do at that next step. I've already gotten the administrative information. So there are still ways, the reason I bring that up, there are still ways that an administrator can monitor the network, but the average individual can't monitor the network because most networks now are in a switch situation. Now, you're probably thinking, what about a wireless situation? You keep saying same physical network. Slightly different technology, but it would still fall into a similar category. When you talk to a wireless IP point, that IP point is a wireless switch. Now, Could you, in a wireless situation, could you listen to other traffic? Could you send a card into promiscuous mode? Different video, different time. The immediate answer is yes, but it's a little flaky. You have to have the right technology or the right card that would allow you to go into a promiscuous mode, or what they in Linux they refer to as a monitor mode. Different topic, different time. So that was an introduction to sniffing. You have to use hub technology. The devices have to be on the same physical hub, and the card that is listening has to be sent into promiscuous mode. You change any of those, you go into a switch network, you're not going to be sniffing. You're on separate segments, even though you're in hub, you're not going to be able to listen. Your card can't go into promiscuous mode, not going to be able to listen. So that being said, let's go on and learn something.